An injury scare in the running back battle, plus more updates on Joe Burrow and the most scrutinized calf strain in Cincinnati history. We'll get into it.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Lisco. He's your host, James Rapine. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and you can find the show on YouTube or anywhere you get your podcast for your daily coverage of the Cincinnati Bengals. And we appreciate all of you who are an everyday listener in that everydayer club, and all of you who make us your first listen every day. And just in case you missed it yesterday, just going to shout out something we're trying, something new that several of you got into today, and that's called Subtext, which is a subscription service that will allow you to get text directly from us. So if you were sitting at your desk at work or working, moving stuff, doing whatever you do, and you got a text, some of you got a text message when Trayveon Williams' injury happened, and you got that first notification in the moment, don't have to go check social media or anything like that. You just get the text straight to your phone. You got some other training camp observations, and we'll continue to do things like that. So if you're interested in joining the Locked On Bengals Subtext community, you can check out the link in the description. And James, we're going to start today, as we do, with a little update on Joe Burrow. Not so much to talk about today. Another stroll across the locker room, which I guess at this point is repetitive. It's old news, but he did it again. And you talked to Zach Taylor a little bit about how Joe is staying engaged while he's not out at the practices, but is doing other work instead.
Yeah, join Subtext / Locked On Bengals. People will remember that. Hopefully, we'll see. But yeah, it's let's. I guess we should start with Joe Burrow, but they avoided the Trayveon Williams nightmare, and I actually think it would have been sort of, and we can go down that path, and we'll get to that in just a second. But yeah, Joe Burrow last year, the part that stunk, I think for him as much as anyone, obviously, but just mentally, yeah, he could be in meetings, but he was pounding protein shakes and probably trying to eat as clean and yet bulk up as much as possible, which is really, really hard to do in a short amount of time. And so I remember asking him what was he eating, and he said everything. And obviously he couldn't lift right away after surgery, and there was a lot of things he couldn't do. He's doing everything now. Like, the only thing he's not doing is practicing. Wouldn't shock me if he's throwing just while sitting down. Like, I actually, he probably is, knowing Joe. And I confirm with Zach that he is lifting. He's getting treatment regularly, is able to get in the weight room and goes during practice to get extra work in there. I just know how addicted he is to the gym, and like how mentally he needs that as much as physically. Like, I've talked to him about that, and I totally get it. And so that part's, I think, really good. Now, as far as his walk through the room, it was a different compression sleeve today for sure than the one he had on Monday. But yeah, walk through, had the same Joe Burrow swag. I don't think today I could tell that like that he wasn't going to take off running. Yesterday, I wasn't sure. Like, you know, he looked just like he normally would. Today, I was a little more aware of it. But he also, practice had just ended. Maybe he had just gotten treatment. You never know. Overall, though, I still think that it's a really good sign. 2 shoes on, no boot, no scooter near him, no nothing. So I think he is in a good spot, and they're going to try to get him as close to 100% as they can before putting him back there on the practice field, and hopefully 100%.
Yeah, that he's walking, I think, remains to be significant. It's not new at this point, but if you didn't catch yesterday's show for whatever reason, the fact that he's walking is a promising sign in terms of the severity of the injury. If it was worse than a grade 1, he's probably not walking at this point in most medical cases, I think. So that is a significant note, even if only from that regard. Taylor also mentioned from a perspective of why isn't Joe out there watching practices? He's still watching tape of the practice with the team. He's still breaking down film with the team. The only thing missing, as Taylor said, is communication, and it's not really a concern for Joe Burrow, who's been calling plays in the huddle for this team in the same system for 3 years now. So that is good stuff on Burrow. And you mentioned Trayveon Williams, who went down early in practice with a lower right leg injury, looks like an ankle injury, according to Zach Taylor, and then later Ian Rappaport tweeting that it's a, quote, mild ankle sprain. Anyone who's had an ankle sprain knows that any sort of ankle sprain is an annoying injury. You don't think of it as necessarily something that's a huge deal, and then you try to walk, and then your ankle starts screaming at you, and you don't want to walk anymore. So Trayveon Williams will probably have to deal with that for some period of time. And what's really unfortunate about this is, one, they needed all these guys in the RB2 battle to get the reps, and two, for Trayveon Williams as an individual, he was primed to have, or has, I guess I should say, the biggest opportunity to carve out a substantial role for himself in the NFL, bigger opportunity than he's ever had, really, where there's no veteran that's clearly ahead of him, like we had with Samaje Perine in Cincinnati for several years. Now he has a chance to go win an RB2 job, or the lion's share of an RB2 job, if he can go show that with pads coming on Tuesday, he's going to be able to pick up the blitzers and do his job in pass protection, do his job as a running back, do his job in the receiving game. And so really tough blow for him individually. You feel for him, hope he can get back out there in time to do the competing that he needs to do to get his fair shake at it. And it puts more pressure on Chase Brown, Chris Evans to step up and show that they're capable of that job.
Yeah, I think there's a few things here. One, Trayveon Williams was the ultimate favorite when it came to the pass protection back, much like, and this is my opinion, much like Jonah Williams to me is like the favorite. Not to that degree, because certainly there's paths for Chris Evans, especially now, and Chase Brown too sees that role. But that role might not be the 40% of snaps that Samaje Perine got last year, 45. It might be 20%. And you have a 3-back committee. And that's kind of how I viewed it coming into camp. And so I still think that that's the most likely scenario, but you're right. It does open up the door now for a Chase Brown to potentially emerge. And by the way, I know this is a training camp takeaway. Chase Brown looked really, really good on Tuesday. I think it was his best practice, was running with explosion, had multiple nice runs where I was like, oh, like he's starting to see this the way that you want him to see it. And part of it might be using pads, and they're all in pads. And that part matters. And so does he keep that same explosion? The answer is yes, in pads. So that might be part of it. But the other aspect of this for Trayveon, the first thing I thought of when he went down, because he was on the field for multiple minutes, and it was during an individual drill. They were working on ball security. And this is just such almost a warm-up period, so to speak, where he's not doing much. It's not like he's cutting and stuff. So it was really unfortunate. And I thought it was more serious, like much more serious. Him getting on the cart, the way it looked, I was just like, oh no. And so, yeah, it stinks for him. But I also think that in a way it's like, all right, well, at least we know Trayveon's coming back. Let's get a look at these other two guys, because I think they know what they have in Trayveon Williams. So if there was any of these backs that could kind of afford it, it's him, because I still think he makes the roster. And it's not like he's in danger right now. Could Chris Evans explode and be Superman and change that? Or I guess Captain America is the reference I should use, maybe. But yeah, that's kind of my 2 cents on the situation.
The only thing that I really disagree with out of all of that, James, is like, yeah, they know what they have in Trayveon Williams. I think that's probably true, but they need to see all these guys in live pass protection. And I think that those are important reps for all of these guys, regardless of how long they've been around the team. And that'll probably start to be more of a factor when these preseason games come along. So if he's out for 2 weeks, say it's a couple of weeks, right? And I'm just picking a number. That still gives him a chance to get out there for some preseason games and hopefully
for Washington and Atlanta.
Yeah,
Washington and Atlanta. You would certainly hope so, that he could at least one of those games. But we'll see. And literally everything crossed my mind from, are we going to have this RB conversation again where they go out? And I'm hopefully not, but that certainly crossed my mind for sure.
They need somebody to step up in that role. And like you said, I think that there was a reasonable expectation that was going to be Trayveon Williams. So good news that it's not too serious, not as bad as feared when I saw the original videos, I think that you put on Twitter, James, where you could see trainers attending to him and looking at that lower right leg, just an ankle sprain. Not a pleasant experience. A lot of people have had ankle sprains. You know what I'm talking about. But could have been worse, and sounds like he has a chance to get back at some point here in the preseason if things are as initially reported by people like Ian Rappaport and it goes the way that we hope it will. More to talk about with pads on. We'll get our pads on practice takeaways and also some notes on the backup quarterback competition, which I know some people are very curious about. As at least one clip that I saw on Tuesday was an absolute dot from Jake Browning, like incredible throw to Jamar Chase. So we'll be able to talk about that as part of this conversation coming up next.
Take your first swing at betting Major League Baseball on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you're going to land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. It's $200 you can spend on everything from betting the money line to the over under to maybe the Reds making a World Series run. Dum, dum, dum. That would be cool, wouldn't it? All on an app that's safe, secure, super easy to use. Plus, when you win with FanDuel, you get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on Major League Baseball than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So sign up today at FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner, Major League Baseball.
James, let's talk about these backup quarterbacks a little bit. There have been some questions that I've
Tell me about
started to
this
see
dot. Tell me about this dot because I was at the
come
practice.
up.
What dot are you talking about?
So Bengals social media
No, not a
posted.
dot. I already know which one you're talking about. It is not a dot. Go ahead.
So my perspective of the throw is that it's perfectly placed. So Jamar Chase is running a corner route. So it's one-on-one with Cam Taylor-Britt. Top of the route, about 20 yards downfield. Jamar wins the hand fighting to break leverage, to get outside. And to me, this looks perfect. It looks like it's in the only place Cam Taylor-Britt can't get it from the camera angles I've seen, where the ball is just over the sideline. Jamar's extending his hands out over the sideline, out of bounds, gets the toe drag swag, as they say, to keep his feet in bounds, and it's a 25-yard catch. It looks good to me. What was your view of it being there live? Because I've seen two angles that are pretty much the same angle, and it looked really good to me from both of them.
No, I'm just kidding. It was his best throw of the day. I was on the opposite side. So in real time, it was not, I was like, ugh. But no, it's a pretty good throw upon further review. That said, it was the only dot. The only dot we saw on either, like, this was by far the worst, like the day where I was like sitting there looking out the window. It was raining, just thinking about Joe Burrow throwing passes. Like, that was me all practice long, because outside of that throw, and you're right, upon further review, I just watched it again. It's like, oh, okay. I was on the opposite side of the field. It looked like it took Jamar out of bounds in real time, especially with the way he stumbled. That said, nice throw by Jake Browning. And Browning has had a pretty good camp overall. I would say he's leading this competition. So let's start there. And the second thing, before I'm really critical of either of these guys and people say go sign, insert whatever quarterback, Joe Burrow's had bad training camp practices too, where we're like, yeah, he was just off target today. So there we go. Disclaimer. Now that that's out of the way, these guys both struggled. I mean, Jamar had to wait. He might still be waiting on the deep ball to get there. There were a couple times where he had Cam beat, DJ Turner had beat, and he drew a holding call on Turner there because Jamar had to stop, turn, and was literally going to have to run backwards to get under the ball. And it's just part of it's timing, part of it's getting used to each other speed-wise, all of those things. But Browning was off, and I don't think Trevor Siemian looked any better today, which is – it's tougher. I get it when you're rolling with the twos and rolling with the backups. At the same time, you want to see flashes. Like, there was one time Andre Yosevich, someone ran a wrong route. It was Andre Yosevich and Charlie Jones, and Siemian threw it to Charlie Jones on his right side, and they were like, it was like a sandwich. Defensive back, Yosevich, defensive back, Jones. And the one of the defensive backs nearly intercepted it, and Jones had to play DB essentially. So I don't know what Siemian was seeing there to throw that ball, but neither guy was really on target. And Reed Sinnett, we'll just throw him out there. He took his first team reps. His first rep was a fumbled snap, which did not go over well. He did complete some passes, though. So I love that you started with the positive because it set him up. I do think Jake Browning is winning the competition as of today. Trevor Siemian was the favorite coming into camp. I also think that's a fair statement. So what's going to be really interesting is Thursday and Friday when Siemian is with the ones. Does it look like, oh, clearly they've hit a different level? Because if not, I think Browning would have the edge at, going into week 3 of the training camp.
And they obviously will have plenty of opportunities, and the preseason games are going to be critically important, I think, for both of them, because for as much as we'd like to talk about what's happening in the training camp practices and you can get a feel for what's going on at different positions, when you talk to coaches, it always comes down to, okay, we've seen it in practice. Does it translate to a live football game? And preseason is what it is, but it still has to show up in those preseason games. And maybe we can talk about some of the other takeaways from the padded practice, but I've also saw a number of pretty good reps for the defensive backs, where I think you might be referring to one where Cam Taylor-Britt is initially beat and the throw allows him to get back into the play and make a play on the ball and get the pass breakup, which you still like to see, right? Like, you still like that from Cam Taylor-Britt, even though he was initially beat. You can be initially beat at corner, and if you can make a play on the ball because the throw isn't perfect, then you're doing your job.
It's a good play by Cam. Yeah, it was also a throw that Jake Lisco probably could throw. I mean,
let's not overestimate.
It brought Jamar. If we're talking about the same one, it brought Jamar back to the numbers, and he had to stop. Versus just keep running out, and go deep. Like, and again, that's a timing thing. It's tough. They're working it out, and I also hope that calf is good to go, and we never have to have this conversation, regardless of who wins the job. Today was just a reminder of that. That's all.
Yeah, also an accuracy thing, right? Like, whenever you have,
he's just
the step from Joe Burrow to any other quarterback, maybe save 3 in the NFL, you're going to notice diminished accuracy to pretty much all parts of the field.
Jake Lisco thinks that Joe Burrow is the 4th best quarterback in the NFL. Subscribe to Substack for more takes.
Oh, this is not the way we sell a product.
You about to get crushed, Jake. Jake is about. If you want to sound off on Jake, you can send him messages now on Substack.
All I'm saying is that there's some quarterbacks who you wouldn't notice a drastic accuracy difference from Joe Burrow.
Jake Lisco called Joe Burrow Joe Dalton. This just in.
Okay, I'm not. I mean, come on. What are we doing? Let's talk about some other standouts here. Pads are on. Eyes are in the trenches. Jonah Williams back with the ones for the first padded practice. That, I think,
balls are floating in the air, just waiting for Cam Taylor-Britt to bat him down.
Yeah, but we can talk about the trenches. That's like the whole thing when pads come on is trench play. And I don't know, maybe they put a moratorium on you guys sending out recording clips of 7-on-7s and 11-on-11s today, because there was hardly any of that on the socials. But
I just haven't put them out.
I know you were there, and you can talk about what you saw. So we'll
I have them. So yeah,
we'll finish there coming up next.
Let's take a look at the tape, Jake. No, I'm just kidding. We're not necessarily going to do that, but it was a Jonah Williams day at right tackle. JW. And this is the line. Week 1, barring something unforeseen. I'm very bullish on this. I think it's a really solid Bengals line. If you have Jonah Williams at right tackle, Brown at left tackle, and the interiors, obviously Ted Karras, Alex Kappa, and Cordell Volson. I like what I've seen from Volson so far. Pads wise, I think they held their own. Now, did they get beat at times? Of course. Sam Hubbard got his a bit. Joseph Osai as well. Trey Hendrickson was limited, is how I would give his designation. Was out there for a bit and then went to the rehab field. I think he's fine. They're just kind of taking it slow with him, making sure it doesn't become an issue. But overall, yeah, I think we're seeing this Bengals offensive line come together a bit. And I think there's a clear difference between what I've seen from Jonah Williams this camp and Jackson Carman. And today kind of backs that up, because we've seen multiple Carman days with the ones, and then just seeing Jonah today. Like, the quarterbacks were bad today, but I don't think that's offensive line related. I think that was quarterback related.
Jonah Williams getting his chance with pads on first. I'm sure we'll obviously see at least a little bit of Jackson Carman in pads with the ones. I don't think that they're going to stop the rotation imminently. I think that is still something that they're going to let play out as a competition, especially as Jonah Williams is working back from injury. They have given him rest at times. As we've mentioned, I think it was the third day of training camp when Jackson Carman was with the ones. It was just essentially a rest day for Jonah Williams, where he wasn't working with the twos. He was just taking a limited practice, as we discussed with Trey Hendrickson. Any other big changes that you noticed, James, with the pads coming on as things kind of step up a level, at least the way DJ Reader and Ted Karras and Zach Taylor all talked about it, expecting intensity changes and kind of tone changes with the ability to get a little bit more physical?
Well, we saw one-on-ones, which I think, and that's what you're talking about, by the way, with the Jamar play. That was a one-on-one play. And I today focused on cornerbacks and wide receivers. So just to be clear, Charlie Jones, he's fast as bleep in pads. That dude, he won every one-on-one rep against multiple different corners. So love seeing that. Had a couple nice catches during the team period as well. I did notice, I'm trying to think here, Cam Sample had a few nice rushes. So that stood out because we know what he did towards the end of last year. So you're hoping Cam Sample and Joseph Osai can both take a step forward. And so that would be a positive thing to see. A lot of people are asking about Myles Murphy, and he's in the mix. There's no doubt. I think he did some nice things today. I was trying to pay a little more attention to him, even though he's just kind of buried on that depth chart. But, he's size, speed, all of those things. I think he's just learning a bit about how to adjust to life in the NFL, but he's all right. The other guy that a lot of people have asked about, or tandem rather, is Dax Hill, Nick Scott.
Mm-hmm.
Those guys were obviously, they've been out there with the ones. It's been very consistent. Nick Scott had a nice pass breakup today. So there you go. There's your safety update on one side. And the other with Dax, and you and I have talked about this. I don't know if we had on the pod. It's hard to tell in coverage when the safety's supposed to be where and what the responsibilities are. It's not as easy as looking at the cornerbacks most of the time. But just throughout camp, I've noticed Dax, he seems to be a handoff to Joe Mixon. He's there would be in line to make the tackle. Or there's a pass here, Dax is around it. Or there hasn't been any game-changing interceptions for either guy. But I feel like that they're progressing in the right direction. So overall, I think the safety room is fine. They haven't shocked the world with 8 interceptions, but they also haven't gotten beat for 8 touchdowns either, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Is there anything on Jordan Battle? I think that's the other safety name that people were curious about. Just that
nothing. Nothing really. I don't think he's. I think they're really trying to play these two guys and get them used to each other with the ones. Obviously, Battle's been out there, but it's the same really for all these safeties. They're out there. Not that I've seen any kind of crazy plays one way or the other, and there really wasn't. Von Bell would have an interception here and there. Now I remember Jesse Bates forced Jamar Chase to fumble as a rookie, but it's not like those guys were making crazy plays during camp either. And so it's tough. I don't think the Bengals are worried about the safety room. I do think that they want Scott and Dax to get as many reps together as possible.
Which at this point, it's early still in camp, so we'll see, right? But given the change in personnel at safety, maybe that douses a little bit of the idea of some of the safety rotation stuff we talked about, some of the 3 safety stuff that we've talked about as a potential possibility, because Jordan Battle, for all the football acumen that he has coming from being a multi-year starter for Nick Saban and doing a lot of different things in that defense and being praised by various teammates and coaches throughout the process from the draft up until even today, Dan Hoard tweeting on Mike Thomas, quote, praising Jordan Battle's football IQ. Despite all those things, the NFL game is different. There is an adapting period, and not everybody can be Jesse Bates and come win a job as a rookie and surprise people that way. So I don't think that it's necessarily.
And he shouldn't win the job. I don't know if Bates would come in and be able to win this job as a rookie. I mean, maybe, but it's different when you it's not like George Iloka had just gotten here. They brought Nick Scott in for a reason. They drafted Dax Hill for a reason. So that part's tough. I don't think that should necessarily be anyone's expectation for Jordan Battle.
Yeah, it's just I'm reflecting on earlier offseason conversations that we had, and we were speculating about different things, partially because we didn't know Nick Scott was nursing an injury at the time when Jordan Battle was on the field in some of those offseason programs until we did know, and then that made a little bit of sense. Tanner Hudson, I feel like I ask about Tanner Hudson every day at this point.
Nice catch in one-on-ones over Jermaine Pratt.
Do you think he's?
I think, man, I have to talk to some people about him just to make sure that my line of thinking. But yeah, he's made some plays.
So are you thinking Irv Smith, Drew Sample, Tanner Hudson?
It wouldn't shock me. Put it that way. It would not shock me. Mitch Wilcox still not back, still on the PUP list.
Mm-hmm.
So that certainly deserves watching. Devin Asiasi, more of a blocker. We'll see. I think the way Hudson makes it, he's got to show the special teams and he's got to show that he can block. And if he's comfortable doing those things, he is a better pass catcher than Devin Asiasi. I'm comfortable saying that.
And
he's got the size, by the way. It's not like he's small.
And Dan Horde pointing out that he's working on his long snapping. The Bengals, after week 1 last year, preparing for that scenario to recur. Any other takeaways you want to hit here from Thursday's practice?
No, not really. I think that's about it. Training camp rolling on. I think the Bengals have a ton of talent, and it's been a good camp so far. Just keep getting that treatment, Joe. That's all.
I'm looking forward to being at the next practice, and we can split duties a little bit, strategically watch different things. That's what I'm excited for. That's one of the things I'm most excited for. Being in there, seeing the practices in person, is the ability to say, like, all right, I'm going to watch this unit today, and I'm going to really tunnel vision on something, and it allows us to split our focus, I think, a little bit better, and hopefully cover a little bit more ground.
You better bring your binoculars, because if they're practicing on that far field, it might be hard for you to see.
Do people just own binoculars?
I mean, I do, but it's for football when you're at games to see down, because some of these stadiums are crazy. Like, you can't. They put the press box next to Jesus and Mary and Joseph, so it's tough. That's how high they are, by the way. That was a heaven reference for those wondering.
Mm-hmm. I don't own binoculars. I feel like people here only own binoculars if they're birders.
I could give you mine.
I'm gonna be the guy in guy looking through binoculars on the stands.
Yeah, that's normal for media.
Yeah. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Tomorrow we've got a training camp mailbag for you. Plus, I mentioned this in yesterday's show. We talked with Dr. Brandon Bowers, Doctor of Physical Therapy, about what Joe Burrow's rehab might look like, and we'll have that for you tomorrow as well. Until next time, Bengals fans, thanks for listening to this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Hoo day, and have a good one.